Captain Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he piloted his salvage ship through the debris field of what had once been the proud Zephyrian fleet. The metallic fragments caught the light of the distant star, creating a deadly glitter show that would have been beautiful if it weren't so tragic. His cargo hold was nearly full of scrap metal and abandoned technology, enough to keep him fed for months back on the Outer Rim colonies. The war between the Galactic Council and the Hegemony had ended 6 months ago. Leaving behind countless battlefields like this one, both sides had retreated to lick their wounds, abandoning their dead and leaving scavengers like Marcus to clean up the mess. It was dirty work, but someone had to do it, and the Council paid well for recovered technology. As Marcus maneuvered around a massive chunk of hull plating, his proximity sensors began screaming. Something large was approaching fast. He quickly checked his scanners, expecting to see another scavenger ship or maybe a patrol vessel. Instead, what he saw made his blood run cold. A Hegemony bioship was drifting toward him, its organic hull pulsing weakly with bioluminescent patterns. These ships were living creatures, bred and modified by the Hegemony's genetic engineers to serve as vessels of war. The Council had always viewed them as abominations, unnatural hybrids of technology and flesh that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Marcus's first instinct was to run. Bioships were unpredictable, and even a damaged one could be dangerous. But something made him pause. The vessel's movements were wrong, too erratic and weak. It wasn't hunting or patrolling. It was dying. He switched his communications array to the standard Hegemony frequency and tried to make contact. Static filled his speakers for several long moments before a weak voice responded. The translator struggled with the alien words, but the meaning came through clearly enough. "Please, help us." Marcus stared at his console in disbelief. The Hegemony soldiers were asking for help from a human salvage runner? It had to be a trap. The Hegemony had been humanity's enemy for the better part of a decade, ever since humans had joined the Galactic Council. They had bombed human colonies, enslaved human prisoners, and shown no mercy in battle. But that voice, there was something in it that made Marcus hesitate. Pure desperation, the kind that couldn't be faked. Against his better judgment, he responded, "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the salvage vessel Rusty Venture. What's your status?" The reply came faster this time, though still weak. "Bioship Nethys requesting immediate assistance. Our pilot symbiote is dying. We have wounded aboard. Please, we surrender ourselves to Council authority." Marcus ran a hand through his graying hair. This was insane. He was a salvage operator, not a rescue vessel. He had no medical supplies, no brig to hold prisoners, and certainly no authority to accept surrenders. But the alternative was to leave them to die. And despite everything the Hegemony had done, Marcus found he couldn't do that. "I'm coming aboard," he finally said. "Keep your weapons powered down." As Marcus approached the bioship, he could see the extent of its damage. The living hull was covered in scars and burn marks, and several of its organic weapon pods hung limp and lifeless. The ship's natural healing processes had sealed most of the breaches, but it was clear that without proper care, the creature would soon die. He docked with the bioship's docking sphincter, a ring of muscle that dilated to accept his ship. The sensation was deeply unsettling, like being swallowed alive. The airlock sealed with a wet, organic sound that made his skin crawl. Marcus stepped into the bioship's corridors, his hand resting on his sidearm. The walls around him pulsed with a slow, labored rhythm, and the air smelled of copper and ozone. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. He found them in what appeared to be the ship's control chamber. 3 Hegemony soldiers, their insectoid bodies badly wounded, huddled around a 4th figure that Marcus initially mistook for another alien. But as he looked closer, he realized it wasn't a person at all. It was some kind of creature, roughly humanoid but clearly artificial. Its skin was a translucent blue-green, and he could see fluid flowing through visible veins beneath the surface. "The pilot's symbiote," one of the soldiers explained, noticing his stare. "It bonds with the ship's nervous system to control it. Without it, we're just drifting." The creature's breathing was shallow and rapid, and its skin was growing pale. Even to Marcus's untrained eye, it was clearly dying. "What happened to it?" Marcus asked. "Feedback from the weapon systems," another soldier replied. "When the ship took damage, the neural link overloaded. It's been getting worse for days." Marcus looked around the chamber, taking in the extent of their situation. These weren't the ruthless warriors he'd been told to expect. They were just soldiers, wounded and afraid, trying to save their ship and each other. I don't have medical supplies for... He gestured at the dying symbiote. Whatever that is. We do, the first soldier said quickly. In the medical bay. But we're all too injured to perform the procedure. We need someone with steady hands and basic medical knowledge. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They wanted him to operate on an alien creature he'd never seen before, using hegemony medical equipment he didn't understand, to save the life of something that might very well be considered an enemy by his own government. But looking at their faces, seeing the desperate hope in their alien eyes, Marcus knew he couldn't walk away. Whatever his government might think, whatever the political implications might be, there were living beings here who needed help. Show me what needs to be done, he said quietly. The relief on their faces was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time since the war began, a human was showing them compassion instead of hatred, and for Marcus, it was the beginning of something that would change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy and humanity's place in it. The medical bay of the bioship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls were lined with what looked like oversized cocoons, each one pulsing gently with internal light. Strange instruments hung from organic tendrils that swayed as if moved by an unfelt breeze. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and something else, something alive and growing. The soldier who had introduced himself as HFY guided Marcus through the procedure with infinite patience. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's bioluminescent glow as he explained each step in careful, translated words. The symbiote's neural pathways are damaged, HFY explained, his mandibles clicking nervously. We must inject the regenerative compound directly into its central nervous cluster. Here. He pointed to a spot just below what Marcus assumed was the creature's equivalent of a skull. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he held the biosyringe. The instrument was warm and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. What if I make it worse? Then it dies, HFY said simply. As it will if you do nothing. You are its only hope now. Taking a deep breath, Marcus positioned the syringe and slowly inserted it into the symbiote's translucent flesh. The creature didn't react, its breathing remaining shallow and labored. He pressed the activation node, and the biosyringe pumped its contents into the patient. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, color began to return to the symbiote's skin. Its breathing deepened, and the fluid flowing through its visible circulatory system began to pulse more strongly. It's working, breathed another soldier. This one named Zixtal. Her voice carried a note of wonder, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. As the symbiote's condition stabilized, Marcus found himself drawn into conversation with the three soldiers. Their stories challenged everything he thought he knew about the hegemony and the war. HFY had been a botanist before the war, studying the growth patterns of spaceborne fungi. He'd been drafted when his homeworld was threatened by council expansion. Zixtal had been a teacher, specializing in interspecies communication. The third soldier, Rexa, had been an engineer working on habitat construction for refugee populations. We never wanted this war, Zixtal explained as they waited for the symbiote to fully recover. Our leaders told us humans and the council wanted to destroy our way of life, to force us to abandon our biotechnology and conform to their mechanical standards. And what did they tell you about us? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. That humans were the council's attack dogs, Rexa replied. Violent, aggressive, incapable of understanding anything that wasn't built from metal and circuits. They said you saw all biotechnology as an abomination to be destroyed. Marcus laughed bitterly. They told us you were monsters who perverted nature for war. That you turned living creatures into weapons and slaves. Perhaps, HFY said quietly. Both sides were told what they needed to hear to make us willing to kill each other. The conversation was interrupted by a soft groan from the symbiote. Its eyes, large and multifaceted like an insect's but somehow more expressive, fluttered open. It tried to speak but only managed a weak, gurgling sound. Rest, Zixtal said gently, stroking the creature's arm. You're safe now. Marcus watched the interaction with growing fascination. The relationship between the hegemony soldiers and their symbiote wasn't one of master and slave as he'd been taught. It was more like a family caring for a sick member. What is it exactly? He asked. The symbiote, I mean. A created being, HFY explained. Grown specifically to bond with bioships, but also a person. with thoughts and feelings and dreams. This one's name is Velthara. She's been with this ship for 7 years. She? Marcus looked at the symbiote with new eyes. Somehow, thinking of it as a person with a name and a gender made everything different. The symbiotes are all female, Nimrexa explained. They're designed to be nurturing, protective of their ships and crews. Velthara has saved our lives many times. Over the next few hours, as Velthara continued to recover, Marcus found himself helping with other tasks around the damaged bioship. The soldiers showed him how to tend to the ship's wounded systems, how to encourage its natural healing processes, and how to communicate with its various subsystems through touch and bioelectrical signals. It was like nothing he'd ever experienced. His own ship was a machine, predictable and logical. This vessel was alive, with moods and preferences and something that could almost be called personality. When he placed his hand on a wall panel to check the ship's status, he could feel its pain from the battle damage, its gratitude for his help, its hope for recovery. "The ship likes you," Velthara said suddenly. Her voice was soft and musical, with an odd harmonic quality that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. "It's unusual. Bioships are normally afraid of humans." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Because humans are intense," she replied, struggling for the right word. "Your emotions are very strong, very chaotic. Most bioships find them overwhelming, but this one finds yours comforting." As the ship's system slowly came back online, Marcus helped the crew plot a course to a nearby neutral space station. They couldn't return to hegemony space, not after surrendering to a human, and council space was equally dangerous for them. "There's a research station in the Kepler Drift," Marcus suggested. "Independent, run by scientists from a dozen different species. They might take you in." "And what about you?" Kethvor asked. "You've risked much to help us. When the council learns what you've done..." Marcus hadn't thought about that. Officially, he should have either captured them or left them to die. Helping enemy soldiers was probably treason, but looking around at these beings who had shown him nothing but gratitude and trust, he found he didn't care. "I'll figure something out," he said. "Maybe it's time someone started asking why we're all so eager to kill each other." As the bioship prepared to depart, Velthara approached Marcus one last time. In her hands she held a small pulsing organ that glowed with soft blue light. "A gift," she said. "A piece of the ship's nervous system. If you ever need help, if you ever want to communicate with other bioships, this will identify you as a friend." Marcus accepted the gift, feeling its warmth pulse against his palm. "Thank you." "No," Velthara replied. "Thank you. You've shown us that the stories we were told about humans weren't true. Perhaps there's hope for all of us yet." As Marcus watched the bioship disappear into the void, heading for uncertain sanctuary, he realized that everything had changed. He could never go back to seeing the hegemony as simple monsters, just as they could never see him as just another violent human. Somewhere in the space between their two civilizations, a bridge had been built, and Marcus was determined to strengthen it no matter the cost. 3 weeks after his encounter with the hegemony bioship, Marcus found himself sitting in a sterile interrogation room aboard the Council battlecruiser, Righteous Fury. Admiral Sarah Hendricks, a woman he'd known since his service days, sat across from him with a mixture of disappointment and anger etched on her weathered face. "You aided enemy combatants, Marcus," she said for the 3rd time. "That's treason, plain and simple." Marcus fingered the bio-gift Velthara had given him, hidden in his jacket pocket. Its gentle pulse had become a comfort over the past weeks, a reminder that not everything in the galaxy was as black and white as the Council wanted to believe. They weren't combatants anymore. Sarah, they were wounded beings asking for help. They were hegemony soldiers with a functioning bioweapon, Hendricks snapped. "That ship could have torn your vessel apart the moment you let your guard down." "But it didn't." Marcus leaned forward, trying to make her understand. "They genuinely wanted help. They were scared, injured, and desperate. When's the last time you heard of hegemony forces surrendering to anyone?" Before Hendricks could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Kepler research station." "Put it through," Hendricks said, activating the room's display screen. The face that appeared was that of Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's director. Marcus had met her a few times during supply runs, and she'd always struck him as someone more interested in discovery than politics. "Admiral Hendricks, I'm calling to inform you that the Kepler station has just received a most unusual delegation. 3 hegemony soldiers and their bioship have requested asylum, claiming they were aided by a Captain Marcus Chen. They're offering to share their biotechnology in exchange for protection. Hendricks shot Marcus a look that could have melted hull plating. And what's your response to this request, Doctor? We've granted temporary asylum while we evaluate their offer. Admiral, the technology they're sharing could revolutionize medicine, agriculture, even space travel. Their bioship's healing capabilities alone could save thousands of lives. Marcus felt a surge of pride and relief. His decision to help them had paid off in ways he'd never imagined. However, Dr. Vasquez continued, they've made one specific request. They want to speak with Captain Chen again. They claim he's the only human they trust. The silence in the interrogation room was deafening. Finally, Hendricks spoke. Doctor, Captain Chen is currently being questioned regarding his actions. I'm not sure that meeting would be appropriate. With respect, Admiral, these beings are offering to share centuries of biological research. If they trust Captain Chen, perhaps we should listen to what they have to say. After the transmission ended, Hendricks sat in silence for several minutes. Marcus could see the wheels turning in her mind, weighing military necessity against personal feelings. You realize what you've done, don't you? She finally said. You've opened a door that can never be closed. If word gets out that hegemony soldiers can defect and find sanctuary, it could change the entire nature of this conflict. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Marcus replied quietly. 2 days later, Marcus found himself back in space, this time aboard a Council diplomatic vessel bound for Kepler Station. Admiral Hendricks had ultimately decided that the potential intelligence value outweighed her personal objections, but she'd made it clear that Marcus was walking a very thin line. The Kepler research station was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, a massive structure built from the combined technologies of dozens of different civilizations. As his shuttle approached the docking bay, Marcus could see the hegemony bioship nestled among the mechanical vessels like a living flower in a garden of metal. Dr. Vasquez met him at the airlock, her excitement barely contained. Captain Chen, what you've done here is remarkable. In just a few days, these hegemony researchers have shown us applications for biotechnology we never imagined. She led him through the station's corridors, pointing out modifications that had already been implemented. Living wall panels that could adjust temperature and lighting automatically, organic water purification systems that were more efficient than anything the station had possessed before, plants that could process atmospheric waste and produce fresh oxygen with incredible efficiency. It's not just the technology, Dr. Vasquez explained. It's the philosophy behind it. They don't see nature as something to be conquered or controlled, but as a partner to work with. It's changing how our entire research team thinks about problem solving. They found the 3 hegemony soldiers in one of the station's biolabs, working alongside human and alien researchers with an ease that seemed impossible, given the ongoing war. Kethvor was demonstrating how to encourage plant growth through bioelectrical stimulation, while Zixtal worked with the linguistics team to develop better translation protocols. Nimrexa was deep in discussion with the station's engineers about living hull repairs. When they saw Marcus, their faces lit up with genuine joy. Zixtal actually rushed over to embrace him, a gesture that surprised everyone in the room. Friend Marcus, she said in heavily accented standard. You came. I said I would, Marcus replied, touched by their obvious happiness at seeing him again. Velthera appeared a few minutes later, looking much healthier than when Marcus had last seen her. Her skin had regained its vibrant blue-green color and her movements were fluid and confident. The ship is healing well, she reported, but more importantly, it's learning. This place with so many different species working together, it's unlike anything we've ever experienced. Over the next several hours, Marcus was given a complete tour of what the hegemony team had accomplished. They'd helped develop new medical treatments that could accelerate healing in multiple species. They'd created atmospheric processors that could terraform marginal worlds in a fraction of the time traditional methods required. Most impressively, they'd begun work on communication protocols that could allow direct bioship to mechanical ship interface. The possibilities are endless, Kethvor explained, as they stood in the modified hydroponics bay. For too long, our peoples have seen biotechnology and mechanical technology as incompatible. But they're not opposites, they're complementary. Together, they could solve problems neither could handle alone. Marcus watched a human researcher working alongside a hegemony engineer to develop a new type of living circuit that could repair itself when damaged. The cooperation was so natural, so effortless that it was hard to believe their peoples were at war. "There's something else," Velthara said, approaching Marcus privately. "We've been in contact with other bioships. Word is spreading about what happened here, about humans who showed compassion. Some of our people are beginning to question whether this war is truly necessary." "And what about your leaders?" Marcus asked. "They're divided," she admitted. "Some see us as traitors who must be eliminated. Others are intrigued by what we've discovered here. There's talk of secret negotiations, unofficial contacts." That evening, as Marcus prepared to leave the station, Dr. Vasquez pulled him aside for a private conversation. "Captain, what you did 3 weeks ago has set something in motion that none of us fully understand yet. The Council is watching what happens here very carefully. If this cooperation continues to bear fruit, it could provide a foundation for real peace negotiations. And if it doesn't?" Marcus asked. "Then we'll have gained invaluable technology and saved some lives," she replied. "But I think it will. I've never seen researchers from different species work together so effectively. They're learning from each other in ways that go far beyond simple technology transfer." As Marcus's shuttle departed from Kepler Station, he looked back at the bioship nestled among the mechanical vessels and realized that something fundamental had changed. The rigid boundaries between species, between technologies, between enemy and friend were beginning to blur, and in that blurring he saw the first glimpse of what the galaxy could become if beings chose compassion over hatred, cooperation over conflict. The bio-gift in his pocket pulsed gently, as if sensing his thoughts. Somehow he knew this was just the beginning. 6 months had passed since the incident at Kepler Station, and Marcus found his life transformed in ways he never could have imagined. No longer just a salvage operator, he'd become an unofficial ambassador, carrying messages and supplies between the growing network of defectors and researchers, working to bridge the gap between the Council and the hegemony. His ship, the Rusty Venture, had been modified with biotechnology provided by Velthara and her team. Living hull patches that could seal breaches automatically, organic air recyclers that never needed replacement. Most remarkably, a bio-neural interface that allowed him to communicate directly with any bioship he encountered. Today, that interface was about to be put to its ultimate test. Marcus drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, watching as the largest bioship he'd ever seen approached his position. The vessel was magnificent and terrible, its hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to spell out warnings in a language older than human civilization. This was the Hive Mother Nethys, flagship of the hegemony's third biofleet, commanded by Warshaper Corvex 9. The bio-gift Velthara had given him was burning hot against his chest, its usual gentle pulse now a frantic hammering that matched his own heartbeat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he stayed put. The meeting had been arranged through secret channels. Communications passed through a network of defectors and sympathizers that now stretched across 3 star systems. "Human vessel," came the transmission, the voice cold and mechanical through the translator. "You are Marcus Chen?" "I am," Marcus replied, his mouth dry. "Permission to come aboard?" There was a long pause. "Permission granted. Be aware that you are the first human to set foot aboard a hegemony capital ship. Many of my crew would prefer you be the last." The docking process was unlike anything Marcus had experienced with smaller bioships. The Hive Mother's docking bay was a cavernous space lined with what looked like ribs, each one the size of a building. Smaller bioships nested in alcoves along the walls like sleeping animals, while organic walkways pulsed with veins of light that guided traffic through the massive space. Warshaper Corvex 9 was waiting for him at the airlock, and Marcus had to suppress a shiver at his first sight of the hegemony commander. Unlike the smaller, more delicate soldiers he'd met before, Corvex was built for war. His exoskeleton was thick and armored, marked with scars from countless battles. 4 arms ended in hands that could serve as either tools or weapons, and his compound eyes reflected the bay's bioluminescence like faceted mirrors. "So," Corvex said, his voice a harsh buzzing sound that the translator rendered as barely controlled hostility, "you are the human who thinks he can end a war with kindness. I'm the human who thinks wars end when people stop choosing to fight them." Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Corvex's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Veltara speaks highly of you. She says you saved her life when my own people would have left her to die. She was injured and asking for help. That's all that mattered. To you, perhaps. To my superiors, she was acceptable collateral damage in a necessary war. Corvex turned and began walking deeper into the ship. Come. There are things you must see if you are to understand what you're truly asking of us. The warshaper led Marcus through corridors that pulsed with organic life, past chambers where bioships were grown from seed pods, past training areas where hegemony soldiers practiced combat maneuvers with living weapons. Everything Marcus saw reinforced the Council's propaganda about the hegemony's militaristic nature. But then Corvex brought him to something unexpected. A vast chamber filled with what could only be described as a garden. Thousands of different plant species from across the galaxy grew in carefully maintained ecosystems, tended by hegemony civilians who moved among them with obvious love and reverence. This is why we fight, Corvex said simply. Not for conquest or glory, but for the preservation of life itself. Every world the Council conquers becomes a sterile monument to their mechanical philosophy. They see nature as inefficient, chaotic, something to be controlled and improved until it no longer resembles what it once was. Marcus walked among the garden beds, watching children play between towering trees while their parents worked to maintain the delicate ecological balance. It was beautiful and peaceful. Nothing like the military facility he'd expected to find. The Council told us you were monsters who perverted nature for war, Marcus said quietly. And what did they tell you about themselves? Corvex asked. That they were bringing order and civilization to a chaotic galaxy? That their way was the only path to true progress? Something like that. Corvex's laugh was bitter. Look at what their progress has brought us. Dead worlds stripped of their biospheres. Species driven to extinction because they weren't compatible with mechanical systems. Entire civilizations forced to abandon their traditional ways or face conquest. They continued through the ship, and Marcus began to understand the true scope of what the hegemony represented. It wasn't just a military force, but a collection of species united by their belief in biological diversity and natural harmony. Their bioships weren't weapons of conquest, but Orcs, carrying the genetic heritage of 1,000 worlds. You want to know why I agreed to meet with you? Corvex asked as they stood in the ship's central nervous chamber, surrounded by the massive bioneural networks that controlled the vessel. Because Velthara's reports have confirmed what some of us have long suspected. This war isn't about ideology or territory. It's about fear. Fear of what? Fear of change. Fear of compromise. Fear of admitting that neither side has all the answers. Corvex touched one of the neural interfaces, and Marcus could feel the ship's vast consciousness brush against his mind through his bio-neural link. This ship is dying, Marcus. Not from battle damage, but from despair. Its crew is tired of war. Tired of killing, tired of watching the galaxy tear itself apart. And it's not alone. Through the ship's senses, Marcus could perceive the other vessels of the Third Biofleet. Each one carried its own cargo of refugees, researchers, and civilians who had never wanted to be part of a war machine. They were families, communities, entire cultures trying to preserve their way of life in the face of what they saw as mechanical imperialism. What do you want from me? Marcus asked. The same thing you want from us, Corvex replied. A chance to try something different. My fleet carries representatives from 18 different species, all of whom have been labeled as enemies of Council peace. But what if they could defect? What if they could join the research project at Kepler Station? Marcus felt his heart racing. You're talking about the defection of an entire battle fleet. I'm talking about the transformation of a battle fleet into something else entirely. A mobile research station, perhaps. A diplomatic mission. A proof that cooperation is possible. Corvex's compound eyes fixed on Marcus with intense focus. But it would need the right sponsor. Someone the Council trusts. Someone who has already proven that humans can show compassion to former enemies. The magnitude of what Corvex was proposing hit Marcus like a physical blow. If successful, it would represent the largest defection in the history of the war. It could provide the foundation for real peace negotiations. A chance to end the conflict through cooperation rather than conquest. But if it failed, if it was seen as a trick or a trap, it could escalate the war to levels of violence that would destroy both civilizations. I need guarantees, Marcus said finally. Proof that this is genuine. That you're not planning some kind of massive attack on Council space. And what proof would you accept? Korvex asked. Marcus thought for a moment, then touched his bio-neural interface. Through it, he reached out to the ship's consciousness, feeling its vast network of thoughts and emotions. What he found there surprised him. Not the cold calculation of a war machine, but the warm, complex feelings of a living community. Hope, fear, love, desperation, and above all, a deep longing for peace. This, Marcus said simply, let me carry the ship's memories back to the Council. Let them see what I've seen, feel what this ship feels. Let them understand that you're not monsters, but people who want the same things they do. Korvex was silent for a long moment. You ask much. Those memories contain military secrets, tactical information that could be used against us. And I'm offering to trust that the Council will see past those secrets to the truth beneath, Marcus replied. Sometimes peace requires someone to take the first step, even when it means making yourself vulnerable. Very well, Korvex said finally. But know this, Marcus Chen. If this fails, if your people use our trust against us, there will be no second chance. The war will continue, and it will be more bitter than ever. As Marcus prepared to leave the Hive Mother, carrying with him the compressed memories and experiences of an entire biofleet, he realized that he was no longer just a salvage operator who had helped some stranded soldiers. He had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a bridge between two civilizations that had forgotten how to see each other as anything but enemies. The success or failure of what came next would determine whether the galaxy's future held peace or endless war. The Council chambers on New Geneva had never hosted a presentation quite like the one Marcus was about to give. Representatives from 47 species sat in the vast amphitheater, their attention focused on the human salvage operator who had somehow become the galaxy's most unlikely diplomat. The air was thick with tension and barely concealed hostility. Admiral Hendricks sat in the front row, her face a mask of professional neutrality that couldn't quite hide her deep concerns. Beside her, Council Chairman Vex Ka, a tall insectoid being whose species had been among the first to join the alliance against the hegemony, drummed his claws impatiently against his seat. Honored representatives, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. What I'm about to share with you may challenge everything we think we know about our enemies and about ourselves. He activated the bio-neural interface built into the chamber's podium, feeling the alien technology merge seamlessly with the Council's mechanical systems. Around the amphitheater, holographic displays flickered to life, showing not tactical data or intelligence reports, but memories, living, breathing experiences from the Hive Mother Nethys. The first memory was of a nursery, where hegemony children played among growing plants, while their parents worked to maintain a delicate ecosystem. The children's laughter echoed through the chamber, and Marcus could see some of the representatives shifting uncomfortably as they were forced to confront the reality of enemy civilians. This is the agricultural section of the Hive Mother, Marcus explained as the images shifted to show vast gardens suspended in biopods. These aren't weapon systems or military installations, they're life support systems, maintaining the genetic diversity of 18 different species that the hegemony believes would be lost under Council rule. A murmur ran through the assembly. Representative Yorth Prime, whose mechanical species had suffered heavily in hegemony raids, stood to object. Captain Chen, these images could easily be fabricated. The hegemony is known for its deceptions. Could they fabricate this? Marcus asked, shifting the display to show the bioship's own memories of battle. But instead of focusing on weapons and tactics, he showed the ship's pain as its living systems were damaged. Its grief for crew members who had died, its desperate desire to protect the families sheltering within its hull. The chamber fell silent as the representatives felt, through the neural link, the genuine emotions of a living ship. This wasn't the cold calculation of a war machine, but the complex feelings of a being trying to protect its community. Chairman Vex Ka was the first to speak. Assuming these memories are genuine, what exactly are you proposing, Captain? Warshaper Korvex 9 commands a fleet of 60 bioships carrying over 200,000 civilians and non-combatants. They want to defect, to join the research project at Kepler Station and work toward peaceful cooperation. In exchange, they're offering to share their complete biotechnological database. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives began shouting questions and objections, their voices creating a cacophony of different languages and communication methods. Admiral Hendricks raised her hand for silence. "Captain Chen," she said formally, "you're describing the largest military defection in galactic history. How can we possibly trust that this isn't an elaborate trap?" Marcus had expected this question. He touched the bio-neural interface again, this time sharing Korvax's own memories of the decision to reach out. The representatives felt the Warshaper's internal struggle, his genuine desire for peace warring with his duty to his people, and his fear that the Council would never accept them as anything but enemies. "Because," Marcus said quietly, "they're making themselves completely vulnerable. They're offering to share military secrets that could be used against any hegemony forces that don't defect. They're risking everything on the hope that we're capable of seeing past our differences." Representative Quintal, a being whose crystal-based physiology made her thoughts visible as patterns of light within her translucent body, pulsed with thoughtful colors. The intelligence value alone would be unprecedented. "But the risk of what?" Marcus interrupted. "That we might have to acknowledge our enemies are people too? That we might have to admit this war has gone on too long and cost too much?" He activated another memory sequence, this one showing the hegemony's perspective on Council expansion. They saw worlds where diverse ecosystems had been replaced by sterile industrial complexes, species forced to abandon their traditional ways or face extinction, cultures erased in the name of efficiency and progress. "This is how they see us," Marcus said as the images played, "as destroyers of diversity, machines that turn everything they touch into mechanical uniformity. And looking at these memories, can we honestly say they're completely wrong?" The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Instead of outrage, there was uncertainty, a growing realization that perhaps the galaxy's conflicts were more complex than simple good versus evil. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the chamber's communication system from Kepler Station. "Honored representatives, I can confirm that the 3 hegemony defectors currently working with us have provided invaluable assistance in developing new technologies and approaches to interspecies cooperation. Their biomedical techniques have already saved dozens of lives, and their agricultural methods could help solve food shortages on 17 Council worlds." "And their military applications?" Chairman Vexka asked pointedly. "Are being used defensively to improve our own ship's survival systems and to develop better medical treatment for combat injuries," Dr. Vasquez replied. "They've shown no interest in helping us develop new weapons." Marcus felt the tide of opinion in the chamber beginning to shift. The representatives were scientists, diplomats, and administrators as well as military leaders. The promise of new technologies and the hope of ending a costly war were powerful motivators. "There's something else," Marcus said, activating one final memory sequence. This one showed the bioships of Korvax's fleet not as they were now, but as they could be. Through the Hive Mother's imagination, the representatives saw mobile research stations, diplomatic vessels, living arcs that could carry the seeds of peace throughout the galaxy. "They're not asking to join the Council as conquerors or even as allies in the traditional sense," Marcus explained. "They want to create something new, a third way that combines the best of both our philosophies. Biological diversity within mechanical frameworks, natural systems enhanced by technological innovation, order and chaos working together instead of fighting each other." Representative Tornvex, whose avian species served as the Council's primary communications coordinators, spread his wings in a gesture of consideration. "The proposal has merit, but the practical difficulties would be enormous. How do we integrate refugees from 18 different species? How do we ensure their technologies are compatible with our systems? How do we even begin to trust beings we've been fighting for years? The same way they're trusting us," Marcus replied simply. "By taking it one step at a time, one person at a time, one act of compassion at a time." Admiral Hendricks stood up, her expression grave. "Captain Chen, you're asking us to bet the security of 47 worlds on the word of a single hegemony commander. If this goes wrong, if it's a trap, the consequences could be catastrophic. And if we don't try," Marcus said, "then this war continues until both civilizations destroy themselves. Admiral, you've seen the casualty reports. You know how much this conflict is costing us. Isn't the chance of peace worth some risk?" The debate continued for hours, with representatives arguing over details, risks, and procedures, but Marcus could feel through the bio-neural link that something fundamental had changed. The memories he'd shared had made it impossible for the council representatives to continue seeing the hegemony as simple monsters. They were forced to confront the reality that their enemies were complex beings with their own fears, hopes, and valid concerns. Finally, Chairman Vex-Ka called for order. "We will recess for deliberation. Captain Chen, you will remain available for further questioning. This decision will require careful consideration and extensive security reviews." As the representatives filed out of the chamber, many stopping to speak quietly with Marcus, Admiral Hendricks approached the podium. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" she asked softly. "You've made it impossible for us to continue this war with a clear conscience. Whatever happens next, we can never go back to seeing them as simple enemies." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "That was the point, Sarah. Wars don't end when one side wins. They end when both sides decide they have more to gain from peace than from victory." Looking around the empty chamber, Marcus realized that regardless of the council's final decision, something irreversible had been set in motion. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps that was exactly what it needed. The decision came 3 days later, delivered not as a grand pronouncement but as a simple message transmitted to Marcus aboard his ship as he waited in orbit around New Geneva. The council had voted, by the narrowest margin in its history, to accept the hegemony fleet's defection on a provisional basis. The conditions were extensive and restrictive. The bioships would be escorted to a designated zone in neutral space, where they would be thoroughly scanned and inspected. Only small groups would be allowed to transfer to research facilities initially. Any sign of deception or aggression would result in immediate termination of the agreement. Most importantly, Marcus would be held personally responsible for vouching for their peaceful intentions. As Marcus prepared to return to Corvex with the news, he received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Hendrix's shuttle docked with his ship, and she came aboard with a grim expression that immediately put him on alert. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "The vote was closer than we announced publicly," she said without preamble. 24 in favor, 23 against.
"And the opposition isn't giving up."
"There are already calls for your arrest as a traitor, demands that the entire agreement be scrapped." Marcus felt his heart sink. "How long do we have?" "Maybe weeks, maybe days. It depends on how the first phase goes. If there's even a hint of trouble, if the public sees this as weakness, the political pressure will become overwhelming." Hendricks moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "Marcus, are you absolutely certain about this?" "Because if you're wrong, if this is some kind of elaborate deception, it won't just be your life on the line. It could trigger a war worse than anything we've seen before." The biogift in Marcus's pocket pulsed gently, as if responding to his emotional state. Through it, he could sense the distant presence of bioships throughout the sector, their living consciousness like whispers at the edge of perception. None of them felt hostile or deceptive. They felt tired, hopeful, afraid, and desperately eager for peace. "I'm not wrong," he said finally, "but you're right about the risks. Maybe we should keep that between us." The journey back to the meeting point with Corvex's fleet took 2 days, during which Marcus found himself constantly monitoring council communications for any sign that the political situation was deteriorating. The news coverage was mixed at best, with some outlets hailing the agreement as a breakthrough and others condemning it as naive surrender to alien manipulation. When the Hive Mother Nethys appeared on his sensors, Marcus felt a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. Soon, he would know whether months of careful negotiation and bridge building had been worth the effort, or whether he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. "Human vessel," came Corvex's familiar voice. "You have returned. What news?" "The council has accepted your proposal," Marcus replied. "Conditionally. You'll need to submit to inspection and gradual integration. It won't be easy." There was a long pause before Corvex responded, "And the alternative is to continue a war that serves no one. We accept their conditions." What followed was the most complex logistical operation Marcus had ever witnessed. Over the next 2 weeks, the hegemony fleet gradually moved into the designated neutral zone, where teams of council inspectors worked alongside volunteer biotechnicians to verify that the ships carried no hidden weapons or aggressive organisms. Marcus found himself serving as a constant intermediary, translating not just languages but entire worldviews. When council inspectors expressed horror at seeing living walls that bled when cut, He helped them understand that the bioships felt pain and deserved gentle treatment. When hegemony civilians panicked at the sight of mechanical scanning devices, he explained that the machines were designed to help, not harm. Velthara proved invaluable during this process, using her connection to the various bioships to calm their fears and facilitate the inspections. Her natural empathy and translator capabilities made her a bridge between species in ways Marcus couldn't achieve alone. "It's working," she told him as they watched council medics treating injured, hegemony civilians using a combination of traditional medicine and new biotechniques. Slowly, carefully, but it's working. People are learning to see past their preconceptions. The real test came when the first group of refugees was cleared for transport to Kepler Station. Among them were families with children, elderly beings who had never seen anything but hegemony space, and specialists in biotechnology who had spent their lives developing what the Council considered abominations. Marcus accompanied the transport, watching as hegemony children saw their first mechanical starship, their eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. Council crew members, initially nervous about carrying former enemies, found themselves charmed by the youngsters' curiosity and innocence. Dr. Vasquez greeted the new arrivals personally, and Marcus watched with satisfaction as her research team immediately began integrating the newcomers into their ongoing projects. Within hours, hegemony biospecialists were working alongside Council engineers to develop hybrid systems that combined the best of both technologies. But not everything went smoothly. 3 days into the integration process, Marcus was awakened by urgent alarms. A small group of hegemony hardliners had attempted to sabotage one of the bioships being transferred to Council oversight. They had been stopped by their own people, but the incident triggered a wave of suspicion and recriminations. Emergency sessions were called both at Kepler Station and in Council space. Critics of the defection agreement seized on the incident as proof that the hegemony couldn't be trusted. Military hardliners demanded immediate termination of the program and detention of all refugees. Marcus found himself once again in the position of having to defend his choices, this time to an even more skeptical audience. But he wasn't alone. Corvex himself appeared before the Council via bioneural link, his compound eyes reflecting genuine anguish as he discussed the sabotage attempt. "These beings acted against my direct orders," the Warshaper explained. "They represent a small fraction of my people who cannot accept that the war must end. I ask not for your forgiveness, but for your understanding that even among the hegemony, there are those who choose hatred over hope." More surprisingly, Council representatives who had initially opposed the defection began speaking in its favor. They had seen the early results of biotechnological integration, the lives saved by new medical techniques, the promising developments in sustainable agriculture and environmental restoration. The saboteurs were stopped by their own people, pointed out Representative Quintal, her crystalline body pulsing with determined colors. This shows that the majority of the defectors are genuine in their desire for peace. The crisis was resolved when Corvex made an unprecedented offer. He would submit himself to Council custody as a guarantee of his people's good faith. If any further incidents occurred, he would face trial as a war criminal. "You can't do that," Marcus protested when he learned of the offer. "If something goes wrong, if there's another incident you can't control, they'll blame you for everything." "Perhaps," Corvex replied calmly. "But leadership requires sacrifice. If my people are to have a future in this galaxy, someone must be willing to take risks for them." The gesture had exactly the effect Corvex had intended. Council opposition to the defection program crumbled in the face of such obvious sincerity. How could they continue to paint the hegemony as untrustworthy when their military commander was willing to risk his own life for peace? Over the following months, the integration process accelerated. Entire bioship crews were relocated to research facilities throughout neutral and Council space. Hybrid technologies began appearing in everything from medical devices to agricultural systems. Most importantly, people from both sides began working together not as former enemies, but as colleagues and friends. Marcus found his role evolving from diplomat to coordinator, helping to establish communication networks between the growing number of integrated communities. His ship became a mobile embassy, carrying messages, supplies, and people throughout a galaxy that was slowly learning to see cooperation as strength rather than weakness. But perhaps the most significant development came when other hegemony Commanders began reaching out through secret channels, asking about the possibility of their own defections. The success of Corvex's fleet had created a precedent that was impossible to ignore. "It's spreading," Belthera told Marcus as they reviewed the latest reports. "Ship by ship, fleet by fleet, our people are choosing hope over hatred. The old ways are dying, and something new is being born." Looking around the crowded coordination center aboard Kepler Station, where beings from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible just months before, Marcus realized that they had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had proven that even the deepest conflicts could be resolved through compassion and understanding. But he also knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The success of the defection program had created powerful enemies on both sides, those who profited from conflict and feared the changes that peace would bring. The next phase would test whether their fragile coalition could survive the forces arrayed against it. 2 years after the first defection, Marcus stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching as the most impossible sight in galactic history unfolded before him. Council mechanical ships moved in perfect formation alongside hegemony biovessels, their crews working together as a unified fleet. The Joint Task Force was preparing for humanity's most ambitious undertaking yet, the establishment of the first truly integrated colony world. The planet below them had once been a battlefield where both civilizations had fought to mutual exhaustion, leaving behind a scarred world that neither could claim. Now it would become something new, a proving ground for the hybrid technologies and cooperative philosophies that had emerged from the defection program. "It's remarkable how quickly things can change when people stop assuming the worst about each other," Dr. Vasquez commented as she joined Marcus at the viewport. She looked older than when they'd first met, the stress of coordinating the integration program having taken its toll, but her eyes still held the same wonder and determination that had made her such an effective leader. "Not quickly enough for some people," Marcus replied, thinking of the latest intelligence reports. The success of the defection program had triggered violent reactions from extremists on both sides. Hegemony purists spoke of traitors who had sold their species' soul to mechanical devils. Council supremacists called for the extermination of all biotechnology as a contamination of proper civilization. More troubling were the rumors of a secret alliance between these extremist factions. The idea that they might cooperate to destroy what Marcus and his allies had built was deeply disturbing, but also grimly logical. Nothing united enemies quite like a common threat to their worldview. "Admiral Hendricks wants to see you," Dr. Vasquez said. "Something about new intelligence from Council space." Marcus found Hendricks in the station's command center, surrounded by displays showing fleet movements throughout the sector. Her expression was grim as she looked up from a classified report. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. "Council intelligence has detected unusual movement in the hegemony's core territories. 3 separate biofleets are converging on the border regions, and their biosignatures don't match any of the ships that have defected." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How many ships? Over 200, possibly more. If they're planning a coordinated attack on the integrated colonies, we could lose everything we've built. Hendricks activated a tactical display showing the projected paths of the approaching fleets. The timing is suspicious too. It coincides with the scheduled arrival of the first hybrid colony ships. "Have you discussed this with Corvex?" "He's as concerned as we are. Claims he has no knowledge of any planned offensive, but admits that his intelligence network within the hegemony hierarchy has been severely compromised since his defection." Marcus studied the fleet movements, trying to understand what he was seeing. Something about the pattern bothered him, but he couldn't quite identify what. "What if it's not an attack?" he said suddenly. "What do you mean?" "Look at the formation. They're not moving like they're preparing for battle. They're moving like—" Marcus paused, the realization hitting him. "Like they're preparing to run." Hendricks frowned. "Run from what?" Before Marcus could answer, the command center's communication system activated. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Warshaper Zexcaral, one of the hegemony's most feared commanders. But instead of the cold military bearing Marcus expected, Zexcaral looked desperate and exhausted. "Council vessels," came the transmission. "This is Warshaper Zexcaral of the Hegemony 4th Biofleet. I am transmitting coordinates for an immediate meeting under flag of truce. The situation has become critical. The meeting took place in the neutral zone, aboard a hastily arranged diplomatic platform. Marcus accompanied Admiral Hendricks and Warshaper Corvex, while Zex Corral arrived with only a small personal escort. The contrast between the two hegemony commanders was striking. Where Corvex had found peace in his defection, Zex Corral radiated barely contained panic. The hegemony high command has been compromised, Zex Corral announced, without preamble. Extremist factions have seized control and they're planning something called the Final Purification. They intend to destroy all bioships and crews that have been contaminated by contact with Council technology. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Finally, Corvex spoke, his compound eyes reflecting shock and grief. They would kill their own people? They no longer consider us people, Zex Corral replied bitterly. We're aberrations to be cleansed from the gene pool. The fleets you've detected are those of us who refuse to participate in genocide. We're fleeing, but we have nowhere to go. Admiral Hendricks leaned forward. How many refugees are we talking about? Nearly 500,000 beings across 150 bioships. Entire family groups, research communities, military units that refuse to follow illegal orders. Zex Corral's voice cracked slightly. They need sanctuary, but I understand if the Council cannot risk such a massive influx of refugees. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This was beyond anything they had planned for. The successful integration of Corvex's 60 ships had been challenging enough. Absorbing more than double that number would strain the program beyond its limits. But looking at Zex Corral's desperate expression, at Corvex's grief for his people's suffering, Marcus realized there was only one choice they could make. We'll find a way, he said firmly. We've done it before, we can do it again. Marcus, Admiral Hendricks said quietly. The logistics alone would be staggering. The Council barely approved the first defection. They'll never accept this scale of refugee crisis. Then we don't ask them, Marcus replied. We present them with a fait accompli. These people are fleeing genocide. Whatever our political differences, we can't turn our backs on that. What followed was the largest humanitarian operation in galactic history. The integrated colonies and research stations opened their doors to waves of refugees, while hybrid ships designed with both mechanical and biological systems worked around the clock to provide transportation and support. Marcus found himself coordinating, not just logistics but also the complex emotional challenges of mass defection. Entire hegemony communities had to be reassured that they wouldn't be forced to abandon their cultural identities. Council populations had to be convinced that the sudden influx of former enemies didn't represent a threat to their security. The breakthrough came when the refugees themselves began contributing to the solution. Bioagricultural specialists worked with Council engineers to rapidly terraform marginal worlds into habitable colonies. Medical experts from both sides collaborated to treat the psychological trauma of displacement and cultural shock. Most remarkably, former hegemony military units volunteered to help defend their new homes against the extremist forces that might pursue them. The extremists did come, eventually. A combined force of hegemony purists and Council supremacists launched coordinated attacks on 3 integrated colonies, hoping to prove that cooperation between the species was impossible. They failed spectacularly. The defenders included former enemies fighting side by side, using weapons and tactics that combined the best of both technologies. Bioships whose living hulls could adapt to mechanical weapon systems. Council vessels protected by organic armor that could heal itself under fire. Most importantly, crews that fought not for conquest or ideology, but for the protection of their communities and the preservation of their hard-won peace. The victory was decisive, but more importantly, it was peaceful. Instead of executing their captured enemies, the integrated forces offered them the same choice that had been given to every refugee: abandon their extremist beliefs and join the growing galactic community, or face exile to the Outer Rim. Most chose to stay. Standing once again on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, now expanded into a massive hub serving dozens of integrated worlds, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that day when he'd first encountered 3 wounded hegemony soldiers begging for help. Any regrets? Velthara asked as she joined him. She had become the unofficial ambassador for bioship communities throughout the integrated territories, her natural empathy making her perfect for helping traumatized refugees adapt to their new lives. Marcus considered the question seriously. His simple life as a salvage operator was long gone. replaced by responsibilities he'd never wanted, and challenges that sometimes kept him awake at night. But looking out at the mixed fleet preparing for another peaceful mission, at the station's corridors where children from a dozen different species played together, at the research labs where impossible discoveries happened daily, he found his answer. None, he said simply. This is what the galaxy was meant to become. The bio-gift in his pocket, now grown into a complex neural network that connected him to bioships across 3 star systems, pulsed with gentle warmth. Through it, he could sense the contentment of thousands of living vessels and their crews, the hope of refugee communities building new homes, and the quiet satisfaction of beings who had chosen compassion over hatred.